Hello everyone, and welcome to our AI in the Humanitarian Sector Research Report launch. My name is Parkinson. I'm a Communications and Marketing Advisor here at the HLA, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to today's session that's brought to you by the Humanitarian Leadership Academy in partnership with Data Friendly Space. It's an absolute privilege to welcome you here today, and we're truly delighted by the global engagement in this research through people taking part in the survey, our interviews, reading the research, and sharing your thoughts on social media as well. So we're absolutely delighted and encouraged by this response. So thank you so much. We have a full house here today. So we have reached maximum capacity of 1,000 attendees from 102 different countries and territories around the world. And that's on top of 2,539 respondents to the survey from 144 countries and territories. So that just really demonstrates and highlights the global interest by humanitarians in learning, upskilling, and trying to get to grips with AI technological developments to see how we're able to harness its benefits while balancing that against potential risks and reconciling that with the humanitarian principle of do no harm. So thank you once again for being here. It's an absolute pleasure. So I'm going to run you very quickly through the format of today's session before handing you over to my fellow speakers to introduce themselves. So this session is 90 minutes and it's going to be in 4 sections. So we start off with a welcome and introduction, followed by a little bit of housekeeping before I pass over to my colleague, Madigan, who is our research co-lead, and she's going to walk us through some of the key insights that emerged from the research. From there, my colleague and fellow co-lead, Lucy, will lead the panel discussion together with our expert panelists, and then it's over to audience Q&A. So that's where you'll get the chance to put your questions to us. And we're really looking forward to seeing what questions and comments that you may have. So I'd like to pass you over to Madigan Johnson from Data Friendly Space to introduce herself and say a little bit about Data Friendly Space before other speakers welcome you as well.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's so great to have you here. Like Haman mentioned, I'm Madigan Johnson. I'm the head of communications at Data Friendly Space and one of the research co-leads on this project. We've been working with the HLA for the past couple of months on this project. Data Friendly Space is an organization that operates really in the AI practical implementation space. So we build AI tools and work in data ecosystems in the humanitarian sector. And what we've noticed is that we really want to be learning from the humanitarian practitioners and how they're integrating AI into their work. So this has been a great opportunity for us. I would like to introduce some of my other colleagues. So if you don't mind, maybe Lucy, you can introduce yourself next and pass it along.
So much, Madigan. Hi, everyone. I'm Lucy. I work at the Humanitarian Leadership Academy as the Data and Evidence Specialist, and I am also one of the co-leads on this research project. My research focuses on a wide range of things, but I especially look at and explore innovation, technology advances, and how we can make sure as a sector that advances localization and locally led humanitarian action, and how we can bring together different people and different voices and perspectives into that conversation to really shape something quite collaboratively together. It's been amazing working with Data Friendly Space on this project because they bring such a wealth of expertise and knowledge and understanding of how AI is applied in today's humanitarian sector. So it has been a huge privilege. And as Kaman mentioned at the start, we've been quite blown away by the engagement of everyone here and everyone who took part in the research. So firstly, thank you all very much for contributing. This is our collective research. So I would like to introduce our wonderful panel speakers now. I'm going to pass over to Ali if you'd like to introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. I see people joining from so many countries. That makes me super happy and excited. For those who don't know me, my name is Ali. I am a humanitarian and development leader. I support several local and international organizations across different regions, mainly focusing on strategy development, governance, operational modalities, and innovative programming. Thank you so much for joining the session today.
Thank you, Ali. I would love to pass it over to Doug Smith from Data Friendly Space.
Yeah, thanks, Madigan. Doug Smith. I'm the acting CEO of Data Friendly Space, coming from the United States of America this morning, my morning, and really happy to join you. I have a background in human rights, technology, and innovation, primarily around entrepreneurial ventures.
Thank you, Doug. And finally, Cornelia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. And also thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm Cornelia Walther. I've been working with UNICEF for 20 years in humanitarian operations around the world, then left, wrote a bunch of books about social change, and became more interested in pro-social AI and hybrid intelligence. And I'm presently a senior fellow at the Wharton School and also at the Center for Planetary Health, where I'm currently in Malaysia working on pro-social AI and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madigan, Lucy, Doug, Ali, and Cornelia. I think it's fair to say that there's big minds and big hearts together in this room. So that's what's needed really to make collective progress in this space. So I'm absolutely delighted to have you all here together with us in this session today. So just a little bit of housekeeping from me. So this session is being recorded. It will be uploaded to YouTube in the next day or two, and we'll send you a link in the post-event email. So this session is being delivered in English, but you can turn on captions, including auto-generated translated captions, by going to your Zoom bar and pressing on the CC button. We do want this to be an interactive space. This session is for you. So please use the chat. It's great to see you already doing that, to share any reflections or reactions as you go along. And for the questions during the audience Q&A, please submit your questions using the Zoom Q&A function. So again, if you go to your Zoom bar, you'll see a little Q&A icon. So you can type your questions using that feature. So don't put them in the chat because the chat will be moving quickly and we might miss that. So to use the Zoom Q&A function, please, for that. And just as a kind reminder, we want this to be a safe discussion space. So please keep any questions and comments that you have respectful and on topic. Thank you very much for your kind cooperation with that. And then in terms of thank you for your attendance and engagement in this forum today. We'll be issuing HPAS digital badges for live attendees in recognition of your learning and engagements in this forum today. So please keep an eye out for a separate email, probably landing in your inbox early next week with details of how to claim your badge. So as this is the launch event for our report, I wanted to just briefly highlight the resources that are available. So you'll have all received an email yesterday with the links, but I just wanted to recap that here, just in case you've not had a chance to look at that yet. So last month, we launched our initial insights report, which is a real top level summary of the key insights that emerged from our research, including the 5 key takeaways. So that's available to download as a PDF in English, French, and Spanish. And then yesterday, we were absolutely delighted to release our full insights report. So that's a 50-page report that contains expanded, deeper dive insights, together with findings from the interviews as well that we conducted, quotes. And yeah, so hopefully that's quite, even though it's a long report, hopefully it's accessible and engaging. And then together with the report, we have produced, well, Data Friendly Space has produced 2 brilliant digital products, which I'll ask Madigan to tell you a little bit about now.
Thank you, Kaman. Yeah, so Data Friendly Space has provided 2 digital products alongside the full insights report. So one is a website where you can go and you can kind of get the top level overview of the report if you're kind of crunched for time. And then the other one is the respondent dashboard, which I would really encourage all of you to go take a look. Basically, you'll be able to filter by different organization types, respondent profiles, different sort of questions around the trainings and AI expertise. So with those 2 things, I think they're very complementary to the full insights report and hopefully should give you a very well-rounded picture of the survey results themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madigan. As data fans, we were really excited to see that dashboard come to life. So you can really spend some time delving into that and having enjoying the different charts and visualizations. So yes, so that's with the introductions done, but just as a little sort of energizer, if you like, we're just going to do a quick poll. And we know it's slightly ironic that we're doing a poll in a session about a survey, but you know, we like to ask questions and we like to learn. So I'm just going to launch the poll and Madigan will talk you through it.
Hi again, everyone. Yeah, it's a very simple poll. What we hope is not going to take too much of your time. But basically, what we would like to know is if you use AI tools in your work. So something that we've seen across the report is a very mixed responses from humanitarians. So some people are using AI daily, some people are never using AI. And then we're also curious about whether you're using it in your personal life or in your work. So this question is really specific to, are you using AI tools in your humanitarian work? So we have 3 responses, yes, no, and sometimes. And we would love to know if you're using AI tools in your work, and if you guys want to drop in the chat as well, how you're using them. I think the more that we can kind of share and engage with this, the better it's going to be for us to kind of learn as a collective sector. So you can fill this out, and yeah, we look forward to seeing what you guys have to say.
This is really interesting to see the numbers shift as people are casting their votes. So I'll just give it 10 more seconds and then I'll share the results. Okay. So you should be seeing the response there on your screen. Is that showing, Madigan?
It is. And yeah, we have a very interesting response. So 66% of you said yes. We have 11% saying no, and we have 23% saying sometimes. So again, quite the spread, and that's something that I think we also saw documented in the survey itself. So it kind of mimics what we're seeing there and what we'll delve into when we get to the research insights.
Thank you, Madigan. It's very interesting because that broadly aligns actually. When in the survey, we found 70% are using AI daily or weekly. So was that 66% there that said yes? So it kind of tracks with what we found. So that was interesting. Thank you for everyone for taking part in that. So I'm just going to do a little bit of introductory sort of setting the scene really for our research findings before handing over to Madigan, who will walk you through a little bit more. So as Lucy mentioned at the start, this is really about the community. This was a community-focused piece. So although the objective was global mapping, we really wanted community voices to be surfaced and really be represented through our research. So this, we believe, is the world's first global humanitarian AI mapping exercise, which really excites us. And we're so grateful, as I said, for everyone's engagement with this. As I say, 2,539 responses from 144 countries and territories. And excitingly and encouragingly, 80% of respondents opted in and provided their email address for follow-up research, conversations, webinars, activities, and so on. So for me, that's really, really encouraging. And also, again, just demonstrates that real appetite and desire to connect, engage, learn. So that's really, really encouraging for us to see. And now that we have this data, this baseline data, we have the foundations in place and the capabilities for longitudinal tracking studies so that we can see how attitudes, perceptions, adoption may shift over time. So that is something that really excites us, and that we hope that this is really valuable to the sector, because that's what we really aim to achieve. So so again, thank you. But it wasn't just about data. Like I say, people's voices, qualitative feedback was really central, and we tried to really integrate that into our findings. And with the nature of the survey and the interviews, with them being anonymous, we were really pleased that people felt relaxed and open and trusted us to share their real candid views, authentic experiences. So we had the whole range, the whole spectrum of experiences. People were very willing to share negative, positive, excited views, cautious views, the whole range, really. I think Lucy will also agree that that spectrum came through when we were doing the interviews. So that's what we wanted. We wanted to really hold a mirror up to the sector and reflect people's true experiences. And one thing that was particularly exciting for us is the engagement in the research from the Global South. So 3/4 of responses were from the Global South, with approaching half from Africa. And because Global South voices are historically underrepresented in technological research, we were really encouraged by this. And we really thank everybody who took the time to take part. Also thought it was very interesting that we had a very notable rate of response from people in French, because the survey was English, but it's also available in auto-translated versions in different languages. So French was the sort of second most common language of responses received. And they were particularly from French-speaking countries in West and Central Africa. So again, thank you so much for those participants for taking the time to engage with this. And to sort of augment the findings, the data, we had Lucy and I conducted 6 interviews to do a deeper dive into experiences and perceptions, and to draw out those details for some of those use cases that we have highlighted in the report. So again, many thanks to those participants for candidly sharing their views and experiences. And in the blue box there, I just added one of the participant quotes. He's a French-speaking technical specialist based in Asia, who's AI curious, not currently really using AI, but wants to know a bit more. And he was reflecting on how he's experimenting, he's testing, he's trialing AI, but he had this realization that without the skills or ability or experience to critically evaluate, verify, and validate the outputs, that these powerful tools were not necessarily helping him in his work. So he has this quote. I'm not going to say it in French because my French pronunciation is very, very poor, but it translates into, without mastery, power is nothing. And I thought that was a really good way to encapsulate maybe what we're calling this humanitarian dilemma over using AI tools as part of their work. So that was sort of my thoughts and reflections on that. And then just briefly, in terms of framing the research before I hand to Madigan, so as I say, 70% of humanitarians are using AI for their work daily, weekly. 93% have said that they have used an AI tool. So we can say that AI adoption is almost universal. I think it's fair to make that assertion. However, despite this global uptake, I think it sort of belies a more complex picture that's beneath that. So what we saw when Lucy, Madigan and I sat down to delve into the data, we came up with a lot of, we saw sort of contradictions, contrasts, things that we weren't quite expecting. So high level of uptake, but low AI expertise, self-assessed that is. High individual uptake, but low integration at the organizational level. And only around 1/5 have an AI organizational policy that they're aware of. And again, despite this global uptake and widespread adoption, that doesn't infer universally positive reception of AI. There are very, very mixed attitudes that I've mentioned across the board. And even those who are maybe early adopters, innovators, who are really sort of open to what AI can do to help humanitarians, there are still high levels of ethical concerns expressed throughout the survey, throughout the research. So that shows that humanitarians are well informed, I would say, I think that's fair to say, well informed, looking very holistically, not just trying to find sort of shortcuts, so to speak, to help everyday work, but really looking at what am I doing here? What kind of impact might this be having beyond, me and my computer and the task that I'm trying to undertake now. So things like data privacy, security, and climate impact came through often in the open comments and in the survey. And another contrast that we found is even though lack of funding is a key adoption constraint for those who want to embed AI into their work, we are finding that low resource settings humanitarians are in different contexts are showing high levels of interest in AI, and lots of promising and exciting use cases are emerging. So when we sort of sat back and looked at all of these sort of trends that emerged, Madigan called this it's paradoxical, she said, and coined this phrase, the humanitarian AI paradox. And we thought that was a really neat way to summarize and reflect this situation, this picture that we saw emerging from the research. So that's sort of the framework in which we have sort of focused our report. So I'm now going to pass you over to Madigan, who's going to walk you through in a bit closer detail of the 5 themes and some of the key aspects that emerge from there. So over to you, Madigan.
Thank you so much. And thank you for setting that up so well. So like Kaman said, we started exploring the data that from the survey. And what happened is we kind of started to cluster it and figure out 5 key themes. So one is that individual AI adoption outpaces organizational readiness. So most organizations remain in the early experimentation and piloting phases, or they haven't even started to think about it. The next is accessible AI tools, and especially the limited specialist expertise in the humanitarian sector. So conversational generative AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude have lowered barriers to AI adoption, and yet, despite the uptake by humanitarians, there's a lack of AI expertise in the sector. The third one was fragmented AI training approaches. So training is largely individual driven when we looked at it in terms of AI learning. So the majority of humanitarian workers receive little to no organizational AI training and instead rely a lot on self-directed learning, which can be inadequate for humanitarian specific contexts. The fourth one was the AI, what we deemed the AI governance vacuum. So organizations do not necessarily have the oversight of AI usage by their team members, and only 21% of survey respondents actually reported that they're aware of an organizational AI policy. And finally, the fifth one we saw was commercial AI tool dominance. So there was a heavy reliance on general purpose commercial platforms rather than purpose-built humanitarian solutions, which often brings questions around the contextual appropriateness of using such commercial tools and data security. So now we're going to kind of zoom into these key thematic areas. So next slide. So with the individual AI adoption, the numbers really tell a striking story. So 93% of humanitarians use or have tried AI tools, with ComEd mentioning 70% of those use them on a daily or weekly basis. However, only 8% of those organizations report widespread AI integration. So like I said earlier, the 25% organizations are in experimentation pilot phases, and 26% of organizations plan to adopt but haven't even started. So this means that over half of organizations are still trying to figure out how to incorporate AI into their work, or even looking, is this something that we should be incorporating into our work? So this creates both opportunities and risks that we as humanitarians need to address. But how do we do that when we have limited expertise, as we'll find out in the next section? Next slide. So again, we have accessible AI tools, and despite widespread usage, expertise remains scarce. So only 3.6% of humanitarians actually consider themselves AI experts. And of those that use AI, there are still concerns around the actual benefit of AI. So nearly half agree that AI improves efficiency, but only 38 believes it enhances decision making. And what really kind of stood out to us is that 30% of respondents remain really uncertain around the benefits of the benefits of AI. So this highlights the urgent need for capacity building, which is a large gap in the humanitarian sector, and also makes us kind of think of how can we make sure that we are also building the capacities of humanitarians to get them to the level where they feel confident of being advanced AI users or experts. So one of the quotes that kind of stood out here was from one of our survey respondents. At first, I'm not familiar with AI use, but later on, after being introduced to us, I started getting familiarized with AI. It's user-friendly. And this is something that we saw quite a lot, is there was the accessibility of especially generative AI showed us that people could use it in more conversational ways that they're accustomed to. But how do we take that from beginner and intermediate to then the advanced and expert levels? Next slide. So the fragmented AI training approaches, I think, is probably one of the biggest needs in the sector. So 73% of the respondents identified training as their most crucial support need for the next 12 to 24 months. So this ranked above many other things, including funding, including frameworks and guidelines. They really stressed the need that training was really key here. So the gap here is kind of stark. So only 33% of INGOs and 38% of local NGOs reported no training at all, and 64% of respondents in total reported little to no organizational AI training. So this fragmented approach leaves practitioners learning in isolation and without the support of their organization, and oftentimes without the support of their peers. And then this leads to what we kind of deemed the AI governance vacuum. Next slide, please. So this is what we deemed the AI governance vacuum. And inside this vacuum, what perhaps could be the biggest wake-up call for all of us is what we call shadow AI, which is unauthorized usage of AI within organizations. So 7% of the respondents who use AI work for organizations that explicitly state no intention to adopt AI, and then agree that it improves AI efficiency. And then 17% belong to organizations that have not yet adopted AI but plan to. So this doesn't account for all the others that use it while not officially sanctioned by their organization. And this governance vacuum can create significant risks around data protection, accountability, ethical concerns, which are highlighted in our report for you guys to take a look. And something that we see there is there's also a lack of usage from individuals on sector-specific tools. So they're using commercial tools, and this kind of, again, raises the sort of ideas or concerns around data security and how the accountability to the communities that we serve. Next slide. So with the commercial AI tool dominance, what we see in the tool landscape is that 69% of humanitarians are using commercial AI agents. So this could be, again, Claude, ChatGPT, Perplexity, and these are kind of the backbone of the current adoption rates. We also see that 35% are using AI translation or language tools, and then 18% of respondents use AI-powered data analytics tools. However, the thing that stood out to us as the research was that this commercial dominance raises really sector-specific questions around data sovereignty and solutions that we need to be addressing. So how can we make sure that what we're putting into the AI systems, especially the commercial ones, follows our guidelines in the humanitarian ecosystem? So that's just a short taste of what we have researched and kind of developed. I urge you all to read the full report and explore the resources that we have. But I'm so pleased to hand it over to Lucy to introduce our wonderful panel, and they'll delve into some of these key paradoxes and continue the conversation from here.
Thanks, Madigan, and thanks, Kaman. It has been an incredible couple of months delving into all of the information. These really are just the top level highlights. So I can see lots of questions coming in already about sort of more nuanced and wanting to understand the details. So I really do encourage you all to go and read the full report, because we have kind of covered off a lot of this, and there will be more conversations to come. And I think what this research has done is really kind of like spotlighted a need for greater leadership within humanitarian AI. I think the paradox and the shadow AI really highlights that need in particular. And I think it really showcases that we need those solutions that are built with humanitarian principles, standards, and ethical considerations built in to the system, and not just into kind of individuals, hoping that individuals adopt those practices. And I think it really opens up a way for individuals to actually innovate and lead in that work as well, with the support of the organisations behind them, essentially. So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by these three amazing panellists. And I'm going to come to you first, Ali, if that's okay. Because what we are seeing is some really exciting use cases that have been emerging. And as you can see in the chat today, there's been some use cases that I wouldn't have expected to see from people. And it's all across the world that we are seeing this. And it really feels like it's driving a culture of learning and experimentation that's kind of almost forcing the sector to consider these policies, the infrastructure around this. So I guess my question to you, Ali, is what do you feel is enabling that innovation, and how can we build on this to strengthen our collective readiness to move forward within this space?
I think from my perspective, my perspective, and it's my first reaction, what we are seeing is not just innovation. It's and I think what we saw in this survey, or when we see the people in the sector practicing and using those different tools, it's mainly enabled by mix of different elements. One is pressure, another is accessibility and access, another one is evidence, and also adaptation. From my perspective, the humanitarian sector and the humanitarians are under so much pressure: funding cuts, complex crises, access limitations, operational limitations, and limited staff. And those different AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude AI, Copilot are providing and proving to be useful in introducing many tasks, especially when it comes to text-related tasks like report writing, proposal writing, translation, and few others. It's also online. It's available. It's in so many countries. It's free. The majority of them are free. The people could use them and prompt them in different languages. And it's easy to use. It's so friendly, as one of the people commented. I also think that the evidence is clear. When someone is using AI or generative AI, they found it helpful and they tend to use it again. So I think all these things, they led the humanitarian sector to adapt and leverage those different tools, not out of strategy or digitalization transformation. It's just to adapt to this chaos that we're seeing and the situation that we are witnessing within the humanitarian sector. So I think in general, it's not only innovation, it's also resilience, and it's a mix of different things. To go back and address how to strengthen that, I think the main important part is to match this momentum that we witness in this survey with the structure and the overall governance, and this could happen through different elements. The main important part is to allow and encourage experimenting. So make this AI experimentation and the use normalized. I think people shouldn't have to hide how they are using and leveraging different AI tools. And in general, I believe that leadership should support and protect this learning and experimenting within the sector. The other thing, I think it's very important for the sector and for leaders and organizations to invest in practical learning, not only generative one and like a tech course. I think it's very important to tailor trainings, to invest in the leadership, and also those experts or the super users and the community practices. We must rely on more and try to support them. And the last thing, I think it's very important that when we look at the governance frameworks, they should be light, they should be practical, they should also be empowering innovation, but also providing ethical clarity, protect data, and a few other things. I think on more high level, when I speak with organizations or diplomats around AI and how to leverage AI and use AI, I think we look at different layers beyond that. We look at computer chips, internet's the first layer. We also look at models. Are we going to use OpenAI, DeepSeek, Llama, Gemini, and other models? And the third one is application and how we are going to integrate that within the wider ecosystem. But I think in all cases, we need to invest in a stronger foundation, which is welcoming, experimenting, the education and the skills and the trainings, as well as light governance.
Amazing, Ali. Thank you so much. You touched on some really interesting points there. And I think your call about investing in leadership and investing in experimentation, I think really resonates with some of the findings that we found. And I also think your final point there, investing in the foundations, will really set the sector up to really innovate. And I think that's something, not innovate at an individual level, but ensure that the sector can kind of embed the cultural and contextual nuances that seems to be missing in these LLMs, large language models, because that's something that a lot of people found frustrating. One thing that I also do want to kind of highlight in response to your point is that actually what we found interesting from the findings was that local organizations are actually already leading the way in allowing and fostering that culture of experimentation and local leadership. That doesn't come as a surprise to us, because we know that our local leaders are the ones that often pave the way. But I think it was really refreshing to see that. So thank you so much for now, Ali. I'll probably come back to you in a second for some more questions, if that's okay. But Doug, I want to come to you next, if that's okay, because as we've mentioned, the report highlights what we are terming the AI paradox, which is widespread AI use by individuals, but limited kind of organizational strategy, policy, and the technical infrastructure. So I guess my question to you, Doug, is why do you think that is? And what are the risks, but also the opportunities of this kind of bottom-up approach that we're seeing? And how can stronger infrastructure possibly affect current uses of humanitarian AI for the better or for the worse?
Yeah, thanks, Lacey. For me, let me just hit on 3 points that really undergird what I see as the AI paradox challenge that the report surfaces. And I admittedly, I see it as a challenge because of how quickly this technology is being rolled out. The first is around inertia. Why is it that institutions seemingly are going much more slowly than those in the last mile services delivery, or whether people kind of on the ground, as it were, and in clusters and in offices? Inertia is the answer. We know that institutions themselves tend not to move very rapidly. There's a lot of stakeholders internally. Often there's good lawyers involved and finance folks that want to talk about procurement and compliance. This kind of inertia that's very slow and very deliberate and very thoughtful is important. And it has traditionally provided balance to field staff. But I think one of the things that the report really shows is that field staff simply aren't waiting any longer. And so that tension within the paradox is really inertia. Institutions are really struggling with keeping up, maybe more so now than ever before. The second, quite frankly, is probably a little paternalism. It is the general feel that from these guiding principles and from these frameworks and from these standards, everyone wants to kind of control what's happening at the field. And at times, that's really, really important. We have legal frameworks we have to worry about. We certainly want to worry about data protection, data security. But at the same time, slowing down dramatically what happens in the field or being heavily directive about what types of tools people can use and can't use tend not to work really well. And I think that's why we're seeing so many people quite, honestly, freelancing. They're using their own logins in order to access some of these commercial tools. Well, why is that happening? Is, quite frankly, people just aren't going to wait, especially when they see, and this goes to my third issue, entrepreneurial opportunities. So inertia, a little bit of paternalism, but definitely entrepreneurialism. If you think about it, we're asking people at the field level to do more with less in pretty dramatic ways. And so part of, I think, what we're seeing is that people are going to use whatever means they can in order to deliver impact. And that could be creating some disruption in the power balance between large institutions and either grant recipients or people who are actually implementing the grants, providing the programming itself. A key here is something that I think Elliot Johnson said earlier in the chat on this call, which is it's important to keep humans in the loop here. We have to make sure that we're not just saying AI is going to solve all of my problems. And I think that really goes to the risk and the opportunities question that you had, quite frankly. The risk is that we're going to have this like patchwork of tools that, as other speakers have noted, have very little context for the humanitarian sector. And so if all we're using is vanilla, we're very, very quickly going to realize that vanilla doesn't work in every situation. And so what that means is we have this risk where the patchwork of tools starts getting further and further away from the context and the needs of the organization. Of course, that leads to the decision making. If we're using tools, these kind of vanilla tools, commercial tools that don't understand the context, and we start making decisions based on those outputs, it could create some risky situations versus if we have tools that are more contextually connected to the humanitarian needs, they're trained on humanitarian data, it's more likely we're going to get better and more actionable results. Without question, there's a lot of opportunities as well. The opportunities are about agency. Really, if we believe in the localization movement, then providing agency to those who are working at the local level is really, really key. And we have to figure out how to support that within this paradox, within this tension. how do we embody our values? How do we really incorporate localization? And then how do we provide agency to people on the ground so that the large institutions, so that Geneva and New York and Brussels, we really now are going to play a supporting role to make sure people at the ground can be as successful as possible. And then the last thing I want to say is among the opportunities, we shouldn't remember the most important one, which is that our impact can be greater and more efficient and more cost effective. But at the end of the day, we can save more lives if we are adopting trustworthy, tested services and models and AI that we are going to iterate our way into. We're going to test and we're going to deploy in ways that can really put information in the hands of those who are responding when it's most needed.
Very much. I couldn't agree any more with those points that you made, and I think it was wonderful to hear it broken down like that. So thank you. And I think you're right, humans are the most important part of artificial intelligence. I want to move the conversation on slightly and come to yourself, Cornelia, because one of the common themes that we heard, and picking up on some of the risks that Doug just identified there, there was a lot of strong ethical concerns, particularly around protection, but also around the environmental impact and whether actually humanitarian use of AI is actually then contributing to environmental crisis that we then have to respond to, and kind of creating this self-fulfilling prophecy almost. And one thing that's really struck me throughout this research is the indications of shame and fear around AI, yet the usage is so consistent. So my question to you, Cornelia, is how do we kind of balance the urgency and this experimentation and usage to mitigate the resource constraints that we operate in? How do we balance that with risk and responsibility? And I guess my reflection is, are these actually any different for humanitarian AI compared to other sectors?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think there's one aspect that is weaving kind of through the previous answers, and that is agency amidst AI. And I would argue that there are 4 pillars that individuals and institutions can deliberately invest in order to deliberately curate agency amidst AI. And that is A, the attitude towards ourselves, but also the tool, which is the aspiration, which is our emotional relationship with ourselves, but also towards that tool. Because AI is not just a tool. It's something which is going into that subtle aspect where anthropomorphism, so our projection of our own emotional sphere onto that something, becomes something that is very much becoming part of our workspace, the intellectual, and then finally the really action. The next one is the approach. And I think that approach aspect has 2 components with, on the one hand, the alignment of our aspirations and our actions. So that's a purely offline, low-tech piece. Why are we doing this? And then the aspiration towards the algorithm. All this debate around the alignment conundrum and the problem that human values are not aligned with algorithms, I think they're missing kind of the point that very often humans, including ourselves, are not really in sync with what we say and what we do. So there's a mismatch of words, values, and practice. And this practice what you preach, there is something that I think is very relevant for all sectors, but which is double painful in the humanitarian sector. And the third one is the ability, which is, on the one hand, human literacy, So a more holistic understanding of ourselves and the society and the institutions that we're part of. And humanitarian organizations are very special dynamics. And I think it's important to be aware of that, especially now as we're moving towards a hybrid society. And on the other hand, algorithmic literacy, not just prompt engineering and not just what's the latest tool, but also what are the limitations, what are the caveats, and how does it work? And finally, the ambition. And I think that's the big demarcation line between AI in the private sector and AI in the humanitarian space. In the private sector, and I have seen the same thing in academia, it's very much the tool for efficiency and effectiveness. And I think where the humanitarian space can make a dramatic difference, it's this ambition to use it as a catalyst for positive social change and to really use it as an opportunity to address some of the long-standing issues that have been around for the past many decades, and where the standard answer was always, oh, we don't have the means, oh, we don't have the money, and there are funding cuts, and that's why we can't do X, Y, Z. That, I would argue that is a very limited answer, but also now, once again, we have a huge opportunity with this ever expanding technological treasure chest if we use it with that ambition. And all of that to say, these 4 pillars, something very practical in which institutions, both local and international, can start investing in, is double literacy for staff, for implementation partners.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Cornelia. And I completely agree. And I think those 4 pillars really frame it well. And I think that's something that I've taken away from this. I've been scribbling as you've been writing, so thank you. I want to come to all of you. I'm going to ask you all the same question just to close this section of the discussion off. And I'm going to ask you, each of you, to reflect on the question on screen, because we've talked about tools, use cases, governance, risks. But as Doug highlighted, and as I see it, we are standing on the precipice of a real new era in the humanitarianism. And with the digitization era kind of starting now, it feels almost, this moment kind of really calls for vision, I think. So what is the one thing that each of you would prioritize to ensure that AI strengthens and not distorts humanitarian practice? Ali, I'm going to come to you first, put you on the spot there.
From my perspective, the problem, the transformation is. It's very important for organizations and institutions to invest in the digital transformation and the way we are going to integrate AI in different things. AI is happening and will happen. AI is going to affect different sectors and different jobs, and I believe that right now, not only the investment, but the impact of AI is already happening, and we are seeing it in different sectors. So I think the key important thing is to invest in the transformation processes, invest in our institutions in terms of how we are going to adapt to different situations and contexts, tailor different learning and development programs, try to invest in the way we are going to roll out the different tools and identify what's the best suited in terms of models and tools. And I think we have learned so much in the sector from rolling out ERP systems, from rolling out different tools. Previously we had Microsoft, then later Dynamics, and then a few other things. So learn from those and then use the best fit, not only the best practice. So in a simple way, invest in transformation for institutions so that we can support those individuals that they are already leveraging those different tools.
Thank you, Ali. Doug, over to you.
Yeah, so Data Friendly Space worked for the last few years with AWS, Amazon Web Services, and we built out this tool called GANET, which is AI enabled. And in that process, AWS really kept asking us, almost forcing us to ask ourselves, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Like, what's the output, but what's the impact? And then how do you get there? Work backwards. And so, my answer to you, Lucy, would be we probably need to stop starting with the word no. We tend to come up with lists and lists of reasons why this can't happen, it shouldn't happen, why it doesn't align with our values. And in reality, maybe what we need to start with is, what is the impact we want to have? Is there a use case that AI helps to frame in order to fulfill that mission point? And then work backwards from there in order to make sure that we have all the bits and pieces and governance and security in line. But let's really start with the number one impact, which is about people. I love what you said earlier. AI is about people. Not a lot of people think in those terms, and I think it's very true.
Thanks, Doug. Struggling with technology there from my side. Cornelia, finally closing statements from yourself.
Hybrid intelligence, which arises from the complementarity of AI and NI, so artificial and natural intelligences, and which I would argue is the cause and consequence of agency amidst AI, and which in the best case scenario can actually lead to pro-social AI systems that are tailored, trained, tested, and targeted to bring out the best in and for people and planet. So yes, AI as a tool, but as a tool that we use very intentionally in order to fulfill the best that we in our institutions have and want to fulfill.
I think it's very clear that, AI is often thought of as something very technical and futuristic, but actually it's intrinsically very human, and it's about power, access, trust, and care. So thank you all very much. I'm going to hand over to Kaman to take some questions from the audience now, and I'm looking forward to seeing what this has provoked in everyone. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Lucy. And thank you so much to our amazing panelists for sharing your perspectives and pearls of wisdom there. That's so, so helpful for us to contextualize this discussion together with the research insights. So in the closing section of this launch event, we're going to move to audience Q&A. We've got some brilliant questions coming through on Q&A. So we'll get through as many as we can. We'll try and do them quite sort of rapid response, if you like, to the questions, but we know we won't be able to cover them all. So what we plan to do is collate an FAQ, and we'll try to respond to those after the event in some form, whether that's in a written format or audio, but we'll see what emerges. So thank you to everyone who has submitted questions. So just to start off, I'm going to take Tiama's question. He or she is asking, saying local actors have more knowledge on using or maximizing AI, and that did kind of emerge from our survey. And this seems to indicate localization commitments are moving in a positive direction. Therefore, the findings shouldn't be viewed as a challenge. Don't you agree? I think Tiama makes a very good point. Often we talk about localization in terms of shifting the power from the global north, from INGOs, through this network, UN system, through to the global south. But what we're seeing, and that's something that was very exciting to us, is that from the research findings, respondents from the Global South are really driving this from an individual level for a whole host of reasons that we've already discussed, but also partly because there isn't the red tape. Which can constrain innovation. Obviously, it's there for a reason, due diligence, etc. But it means it gives people license and permission to test and experiment. So I wanted to put this to you, Ali, because I know that this is something that you have experience of. So would you like to share any thoughts in response to Tiama's question?
First, I want to agree. In general, my position, local NGOs and local leaders, this speak faster than what other international bodies are doing. And I think this is coming from one, their ability to adapt quickly and try to leverage whatever is available to help them do things faster or better. Two, I think it's the experimenting culture. I think in general, local NGOs, especially in the global south, their main focus is how to deliver services, and they have a bit of less focus on the overall rules and regulations in different contexts or countries or etc. And I could see also a huge difference between organizations that they are in the US and their ability to adapt and experiment, and the organization in the EU or organizations in Africa or Asia or Middle East or etc. They are approaching AI in different ways. I think my observation in general, in a simple way, local organizations are moving fast, breaking things. That's one of the key, let's say, trends in their strategy to leverage those different AI tools. But when it comes to larger institutions and international ones, they are taking on understanding the overall ecosystem and then taking it from there. I just want to add one more thing here, is that I could see local organizations experimenting with AI into a totally different level. So I'm not talking about ChatGPT or generative AI or Claude AI or etc. I'm talking about prompting agents in AI to make those agents do or and this year we've been working with one organization on how to have an AI advisor in their board of directors in the board of the organization. So I think they are experimenting in a faster way, but it's coming from their ability to adapt, their interest in moving fast, and their interest in focusing on how to do the job faster and in efficient way, with less focus on the overall ecosystem and the compliance associated with it.
Thank you very much, Ali. That is a great thought-provoking response. I'm sure we could dig much deeper into that, but we'll move on to the next question. So I'm kind of grouping a few together. We have a person who's sort of saying it expresses concerns around the stigma of using AI, that people might perceive workers as being lazy if they're using AI tools. And a question by Amalia, she says, this is a question for Cornelia here. Amalia says that Cornelia's recent article flags the risk that AI does not, in fact, lighten the load for humans, but keeps raising the bar for productivity. So I thought that was quite an interesting, that's an interesting observation. So Amalia wants to know specifically for the humanitarian sector, what are the implications?
I think that's a can of worms to answer that question, but I think there are two aspects to that. A, it's important to keep in mind that organizations, and in particular organizations that are threatened with funding cuts, are adjusting very fast to a time and space where answers are expected 24/7, and where with shrinking people, the same output is still expected. And managers are looking at the AI space as well. And they think, well, if I can do that report with the snip of a finger and ChatGPT, then why does my team take 2 weeks to accomplish it. So I think this initial promise that AI was presented with, that it's going to free up time and space for humans to leave away the redundant tasks and to focus on the strategic, high-level creative thinking, I think that promise has turned out very quickly very void. So that's number one. Number two, I think there is still a possibility to harness AI as an ally and as something that is helping each of us to identify and to focus more on what we enjoy doing, but also what are our unique strengths and talents, which we all have, but which tend to fall between the cracks in this hamster wheel of doing, and where we don't have enough space to really take a step back and put things into perspective. And if we manage the current transition well, both as part of a team, but also as part of this evolving relationship between our NI and our AI, we have actually an opportunity to carve out some quality time for those tasks that bring out our unique, quirky strengths. But that in and by itself requires effort. And it's this kind of uncomfortable effort that can't be delegated, because it means to think, what's my why? What makes me unique? And especially what remains my unique selling points, no matter how sophisticated ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini are becoming.
Thank you very much, Cornelia. Again, a great answer. And the frameworks that you give are really thought-provoking, especially around AI and NI, this combination of the two. So moving on to a question from Cynthia, which I'm going to put to Doug, because I know that Doug has experience working in different sectors and maybe can speak to this. So Cynthia is asking a question around funding. So how can organizations secure funding from donors for digital transformation initiatives while ensuring that the digital rights and ethical considerations of beneficiaries, particularly refugees, are protected and prioritized throughout the process? So I know that's a big question, but I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that, please, Doug.
Yeah, it seems to me those are actually really two questions. The first question is around funding and funding opportunities, and the second is around helping funders to stay consistent and true to data security standards. That is a conversation that we should all be having with donors and with funders, which is that just because we are using AI, it doesn't mean that suddenly we're going to abandon our values and we're not going to simply open all data up, particularly secure, very important demographic data that's easily tracking people. We're not going to open that up to people. We can have the argument about whether people really aren't already being tracked by some large corporate entities that I won't mention, like Facebook. But the reality is that the conversation that we can be having with funders is about values and our kind of continued commitment. The first question, though, was a different question, which was about availability of funding itself. If there were a funder on this call, I would really encourage them to think about how it is that you are both funding into this opportunity and then not doing what funders often do, which is leave a littered trail of proofs of concept that have no sustainability behind them. Let's try to see where we find good, contextual, maybe even already launched tools that are proven, and start funding those rather than encouraging people to create new systems and new opportunities and new standards. The reality is that funders, if they will just take a break, look at the landscape, they will probably find that there's some opportunities that they could fund now and then focus more on scaling than trying to catch up with the work in AI happening at the local level.
Thank you very much, Doug, for tackling that two-part question. Thank you. So next I have a question around training that I'll put to Madigan. So I'll combine a couple of questions. So Ruth is asking, how can organizations provide effective AI training for their staff? So I wondered if you have any thoughts on that. And then NAHR funding, as I said, in response to the comments around fragmentation in AI training, they ask, what alternative approaches would you recommend that follow a more holistic and integrated, well, there's no final word there, but I think it would assume it would be something like approach. So yeah, have you got any thoughts on that, please, Madigan?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So I think the first thing that I would recommend if you're trying to implement training into your organization is to look at the pain points. So something that we often see is that because AI can be a buzzword, people are, oh, we should just bring it in and use it. The first thing is to see, do we actually need this? Let's look at the pain points in our systems. Let's figure out where we need to improve and then focus on those pain points and address those pain points with training. In terms of the training itself, Data Friendly Space has had a couple different just sort of training opportunities. And what we've seen is that, again, it really is dependent on your audience or your team members. So what we've had happen is, we've had general AI training. So trainings just on, let's say, prompt engineering. So if you're using generative AI tools, how do you prompt them effectively to get the most out of those responses? The other ones are surrounding sort of the ethics of AI. So again, how do we make sure that we're putting in secure data? What do we have to do to protect that data if we are using AI tools? And then, the other ones could be around the general frameworks or guidelines. So how do you make sure that it's not just another report or framework that you're giving to your staff, but how do you actually make sure that they're engaging with it and actually taking the most important pieces out of that? I think the other thing is to consider the different formats of training. So again, I think the HLA has done an amazing job with the Kaya platform. So there's a really good resource right there. But again, you also might be operating in low resource settings where you might not have the digital capabilities. So you have to kind of figure out and tailor the trainings to meet your audience where they're at. So what I would really encourage is everyone to identify the pain points within your organization, decide if you need to use AI to solve those pain points or not. And if you decide yes, okay, then how are we going to have these trainings fit our audience's backgrounds in the areas of expertise? The other thing is to make it really participatory. So I think there is where you really need to engage with your team members to hear what they would like to learn. You're going to get a lot out of that besides just saying, okay, here we're going to have an AI training. And instead you're going to see like, okay, how can we share knowledge amongst each other and how do we kind of cover those gaps? So I think those are some of the recommendations I would consider. But again, it's different for every sort of team and organization out there. And I really think the first step is just having those sort of conversations.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Madigan. Pain points, that is a good starting point. So the next question is around ethical concerns. So I'll sort of take the first part of that and then hand over to Lucy to share some thoughts. So the person is asking, what are the categories of ethical concerns expressed in the research? Are there variations by geography or other variables? So to speak to the first point, in the survey, we called out ethical concerns as a specific question, and we designed it as an open comment. We didn't put specific breakdown of ethical concerns like multiple choice. And the reason that we did that is we didn't want to inadvertently guide prompts or introduce some form of bias into the responses. We just wanted to ask that open question. And a lot of people typed no, not applicable, so we obviously so that actually was a finding in itself for the people who stated that. And then we did more of a sort of text analysis of the responses that came through. And as I've mentioned earlier, they were around privacy, sensitive data, particularly because of the communities that we're working with, the dangers and risks of using that for AI, especially in commercial tools that we've talked about and not specialist humanitarian specific tools. And a lot of people put things about the moral ethical considerations of sort of delegating your human decision making to a machine, so to speak, especially when it's sensitive, again having a direct impact on the communities that they're working with. And then, as I mentioned, climate impact came through. And this is not scientific, but what I saw was a lot of the INGO respondents were citing climate impact, although it was mentioned across the board. So I'll just pass over to Lucy to ask if you would like to add anything to that.
You're really welcome, Anne. And I think all I would add to that is it wasn't observed explicitly. But I think looking through the comments in the chat today really emphasizes this concern that people have around how AI affects their job security and their perception of their capabilities. And that's something that's really common, because one thing that really struck us is that, as we said at the start, everyone has been really engaged in this conversation. But when we spoke to people, there was this real kind of concern about being identifiable or saying the wrong thing or giving the impression that they were using AI when they shouldn't be. And I think that in itself is quite a strong observation. And I think it comes back to the humanitarian sector is obviously in a very volatile state at the moment. A lot of us will know that our work has been shut down. I'm sure people on this call have experienced their programs being paused or pulled, our funding being cut, which in turn leads to job losses. And I think there is a tension emerging around how AI could be used against us or used to replace us. And I think as the conversation has focused so much on the importance of people and agency, it's very short-sighted in a way. So I think that would be the only thing that I would add to the ethical considerations that warrants further exploration, if you ask me.
Yeah, brilliant, Lucy. Yeah, I think you rounded that off really well. Thank you very much. So we're coming towards the end of this session. Unfortunately, the time has absolutely flown by. I think we have time for 1 to 2 more questions. So I have a couple that I will put to anyone to answer if anyone wants to jump in. So somebody has asked, what are the most practical ways humanitarian organizations can start integrating AI tools in field operations, especially in low resource settings? So I think that's a really great, relevant question. And I wonder if anyone on the panel or research team has any suggestions. Go ahead, Cornelia, jump in.
Yeah, I have 3 thoughts. I think it's a great opportunity and a great tool for any organizations, but in particular for big organizations, to ask the tool, to ask ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you're using, what your biggest opponent to the program that you are planning to implement would voice. So that would mean maybe for a big organization like the UN to ask, well, what would a government say? What would a small NGO partner feel about my proposition? So that we move a little bit away from this parachuted, our size, our voice decides it all, but also from the other way around, for a small organization, what would make my program unique and special for a big donor? what makes me special? What makes our mission special? So to help us, each of us in our respective capacities, to carve out our unique selling point. And then the other one, there's also the personal possibility now with ChatGPT to personalize and to have highly personalized reminders, and maybe to tailor and or program your own chatbot, which apparently the majority of us are using every day, to send you a daily reminder of what are your big goals, what are your big aspirations that you are aspiring to as a humanitarian, but also as a human being. What are those special values that you sometimes maybe miss because you're so busy and because you're so stressed out? And then at the end of a day, a week, a month, a year, you're looking back and you think, was that really me at my best self? And that you use ChatGPT as this non-judgmental buddy in the pocket. That only you and ChatGPT know what's being said, but from which maybe it's easier to listen to the uncomfortable truth that we all need to hear at some point.
Yeah, go ahead, Ali.
Yeah, I want to mention two things here. The first one, if you are looking for a quick win, then work with those super users and this community of practice, and try to explain in general the key data protection concerns or challenges, and then let them experiment. That's a quick one. But from my perspective, looking at it from the institutional angle, I think there are several things to consider and dive into, especially with good questions. I think it's very important to look at one, the innovation, and the innovation. One of the key things is to understand how the community is using and leveraging those tools. So I think this survey is an excellent foundation for that. And at the same time, try to see how to empower that environment and support the people so they don't even hide how they are using it or etc. So innovation is one. Two, I think it's the infrastructure. Institutions and organizations must look at the infrastructure in terms of the devices that they have, the laptops, the computers, the internet, the access to those different tools, the models that they are going to use, and all the things around the infrastructure. And one of the key elements here is data. Start your AI strategy or AI integration with a strong data management framework, with strong data. Without strong data, you are going to face so many challenges, and most probably garbage will produce garbage in the end. The third element, which is very important from my perspective, is around the ecosystem. It's very important to see, after exploring the innovation, the infrastructure, how you are going to link what you did with your wider ecosystem, because the organizations are also have M&E systems, they also have financial systems, they have HR systems, they have ERP systems, and the NGOs are not in their own ecosystem. No, they are also interacting with the wider international affairs, foreign policies, trade, economy, government's rules and regulations, and so many other things. So it's very important to look at that lens. But one of the key things that I think I would put it as a key pillar of foundation when it comes to innovation, infrastructure, and ecosystem is partnerships. You must work with others. You must engage with other organizations, with other partners. You must engage with private sector, especially with tech companies. And we have so many platforms. They are excellent in sharing knowledge and providing that space. And Humanitarian Leadership Academy is one for sure. We also have NetHop, and I've seen and met so many tech leaders are part of that community. So I think partnership and engaging with all the others is key when it comes to innovation, infrastructure, and ecosystem. And I want to put additional one here, and it is my hope to see more organizations doing that, open source what's happening. I really think it's very important to share with everyone what are the challenges that you are facing? What are the issues? What are the risks? What are the achievements? What are the deliverables? How you are progressing? Because that's how we are going to learn from each other. But in a simple way, innovation, infrastructure, ecosystem, partnership, and open source your experience.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Ali. And I think they're brilliant words to close the audience Q&A on collaboration, learning from each other, knowledge exchange. I think that is really crucial as we forge ahead a path together. So thank you very, very much to our amazing expert panelists and, of course, my research co-leads. This has been a brilliant journey. I've learned so much, but I know it's just the beginning. And yeah, like Ali said, it's collaboration. It's pooling what we have to forge this path ahead for AI that works for us as a sector. So I'm just going to take the last 5 minutes to wrap up the session. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us, for adding great reflections in the chat as we've gone along, for posting your brilliant questions. We're sorry that we didn't get a chance to answer all of the questions. We wish we had the time, but like I say, we'll collect some FAQs and we'll try and get some response to you in a format that works. So so we just want to thank you. As I say, the full report was released yesterday together with the supporting resources, and behind the scenes, the team will be working on translating the reports into French and Spanish. So we'll announce on our social media channels and by email when those translated reports are ready. And in the spirit of learning, we do, of course, encourage you to visit Kaya, the HLA's digital learning platform, where we have some great AI-focused resources, including a course in collaboration with Data Friendly Space. There's lots of resources from NetHope, so they're brilliant, really, really great, useful resources that are new, hot off the press. So please do go and check those out. And if you're not a Kaya user, it's a free resource. You just have to register once and you can access over 500 courses, and they're often available in a range of languages as well. So as I say, we had to pack a lot into today's 90 minutes, but we do plan to continue to develop more content focused around humanitarian AI and humanitarian tech. So keep your eyes peeled for more webinars and podcast episodes. And if you've enjoyed hearing from Ali today, you'll be pleased to hear that there is a new podcast episode coming out imminently. And this was one of the second part of a 2-part podcast. And in this episode, Ali is going to be talking about strategic insights for 2025 and 26, including developments in the AI sector. So please keep an eye out for that episode that will be released very soon. And on top of that, the research team, so Madigan, Lucy and I will continue to work on content, written content, articles. Lucy's produced a brilliant one on the history of humanitarian AI. So in this, she emphasizes we think about AI as ChatGPT, generative AI that's emerged in the last couple of years, 2 to 3 years, but she shines a light on developments before that. So that's a really accessible and interesting piece. So please do read that. So yes, I'm now going to close the session. So when this window closes in a moment, you'll see a quick survey pop up. So please share your feedback. We'd be really grateful to hear from you. As I say, keep an eye on your inbox. A copy of these slides and the YouTube link will be emailed to you in the next 1 to 2 days, together with some links to relevant resources that you may find of interest. And we will be working on another very quick survey. So it's not another mapping exercise. This is more to try and get some more thoughts and feedback from the humanitarian community on what would be useful. What would you like to see in the pipeline? What would be the most useful for you? So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So we'll be in touch. And then finally, in recognition of your learning and engagement in this forum today, we'll be sending you a HPAS digital badge, which is what you can see there, that picture on the right. And that's brilliant to share on LinkedIn. It's a nice discussion tool to show that you've been engaging in this space and keeping up to speed on the latest developments in AI in the humanitarian sector. So thank you very much. So yes, once again, thank you to our panelists, research co-leads, and of course, everybody who's taken part and taken the time to be here today. So yes, thank you. And I'm now bringing this session to a close. Thank you very much.